I was going to get it and throw it to somebody, but I don't have it now. Would have been a surprise. No, I'm not going to throw it at anybody now. No. It would be a surprise. All right. You're annoying. You have all said it. You've all thought it. I certainly have. I've been told that regularly in my house, how annoying I am. I do it on purpose because it amuses me. However, pay attention to what this law read on the second reading. Part of your calling as a Christian is to provoke each other to good works and to love. That is part of your calling in life, and the reason, one of the big ones that we have a church in the first place, is so that we can get under each other's skin when necessary, to provoke, to get in each other's face, to do whatever it takes to get you out of your own head and living in the world. And more than that, getting out of your own head, instead of just thinking stuff, and keeping silent and private about whatever it is you're thinking about the world, it is a call to pull yourself out of yourself into the realm of the world so that you can actually do something useful with your life. That is, after all, the big question in most of the world these days. What is the meaning of my life, and what purpose do I serve by being here? And it's a legitimate question. The reason there is so much disaster and destruction all around the world, including the bombs and the shootings in Paris most recently, the blowing up of the Russian airliner in Egypt, the yearly shootings in our public schools, all of those things are signs of the times that people do not have any clue as to why they are here on the planet. And because they do not understand why they are here, they don't have any compelling reason to keep you or I here either. It don't matter. In Bible talk, by the way, occasionally I use the word sloth, not for the animal, or acedia, or anomie. Those are all different words describing a deadly sin of staying purposefully busy and going nowhere, because nothing matters. And if in fact you live that kind of life where you're always busy, you're always running, and you're always moving and grooving and going, and you ask the question of the meaning of your life and your purpose, and you have no answer, that's acedia, sloth, anomie. And that is the world in which we live. Now, Jesus talked about all of these signs of the times. You know that. I mean, I just read a portion of that today. Our lector read a portion of it from Daniel, the signs of the times. There are always, in every generation, in every single culture, there is not a time in history in which there have not been wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. It is the way in which the world functions. It is what St. Paul wrote about, by the way, in the book of Romans, when he talked about the earth itself being in turmoil, just as our lives are often in turmoil and our cultures. The whole earth is in turmoil. Now, here's the thing. What differentiates you from everybody else who is a Christian in name or whatever is that wherever you see turmoil, your calling is to accept it as an invitation to enter the turmoil. That is why we have the word calling and vocation and agape, love of neighbor, love of the world in general and in specifics. Your calling is to enter the world as it is today, and to enter it with a hopefulness that God is present in it, and you are part of the change to an alternative future that does not yet exist, but we are heading that way. You must keep in mind that most of the world is getting along quite nicely. It's very interesting. I was doing a little research on this, but you will understand this very easily and very quickly. World War I and World War II, those were, the First World War was the war to end all wars. Second World War was not the war to end all wars, it was the war to eradicate an evil. But there was no talk of apocalypse. There was no talk of the end of the world. That was the time when people still had meaning and purpose. And the influence of Christianity on every culture was so dominant that this was an eradication of evil in one case, and a hoping of a war to end all wars in the other case. But there was always the larger story of movement toward peace, well-being, and wholeness. That changed after World War II, and now we have regular calls that there's going to be an apocalypse, the end of times, and all of that kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, send me a couple $100. You know, I always wonder the people who call out for the apocalypse and also ask for money, why they need the money. I don't know. I'm just asking. Just saying. But when Jesus talks about it with his disciples, he very simply suggests to them that theirs is not to worry about the time and the signs of things. That every generation is going to have the same kinds of evils, problems, natural disasters. It's part of being alive and living. And for disciples, to see those more as invitational calls to move toward in order to heal, to bring peace and well-being in the midst of that violence, in the midst of those disasters. And we do that through our congregation. You know that. I mean, we send money all over the place. Sometimes we've had people going different places. We have lots of military personnel who have been all over the world trying to bring order out of chaos and hopefulness in the midst of disaster. You know that as well as I. That's all part of who we are as a church team. We support each other that way. I was reading an interesting article by Gordon Smith. He's a special forces trainer. And it was very interesting in his little brief summary of what he did with his special forces folks. In the training program, it sounded suspiciously like the gospel to me. So the first thing, that when you're in a life situation, a survival situation, he said this, quote, "I tell all of the students in the survival training this. If you have a guy with all the survival skills in the world who has a negative attitude, a guy who doesn't have a clue, but has a positive attitude, I guarantee you that the one with the positive attitude is coming out of the woods alive." It's as simple as that. And that is how he does his training, his practice. Because the people who have positive attitudes toward the world, even in the midst of chaos and craziness, are people who are going to come through the other side because they have devoted their lives to a purpose and a meaningfulness that goes beyond themselves. You've all had the experience too when you've had the loss of loved ones, of people you care about, people who have moved huge distances away that you don't get to see in the telephone. I'm sorry. Texting just doesn't cut it on some things. You try, but it just doesn't cut it. And so you're in a state of mourning. But then eventually you know that you have to move out into the world again, and it provides an opportunity to make some new friends, to get reacquainted with different family members that you haven't had to have the time and spend the time working on, but you do now. There's any number of things that go with that. Smith talks about it and says that the survival means breaking down tasks and thoughts into manageable chunks with the goal of improving the situation by degree. That's pretty much what Jesus talked about, right, in the Sermon on the Mount. What did he say? Very simply, take each day with whatever its troubles are and live in it. Tomorrow will have its own days and its own troubles. But live this day fully and completely now. And you break it into manageable chunks so you can handle it. Jesus said, the one who endures to the end will be saved. That was in the gospel reading, verse 13. So you who live in hope and have the gifts of a calling and a vocation, a meaning and a purpose, you are well equipped to live in each day, and each day having its own integrity and its own purpose, its own value. Second thing Smith talks about is keeping your priorities straight. You need food, water, shelter, and medical care. And water is usually the top priority. I don't know if you ever noticed how Jesus used lots of metaphors, right? He talks about himself, I am the bread of life, I am the living water, baptismal. Gifts are tied in with water through the gift of the Spirit and water. That's very simply because you have to get back to the basics and essentials. I don't know about you, but every now and again I take a look at our attic and the garage, which we've never had a car in, by the way. My stuff is there. And I keep thinking, you know, if I die, my children are not going to think well of me. Because I got clutter. And I don't consider myself somebody who has clutter, but I got clutter. And it just happened. And when you have clutter, you're no longer in a position to think because you're stunned that you've got so much clutter in your life. I got a really neat picture on my phone from somebody who shall remain nameless. I got a little text saying, my life blanks. You can fill that in. And I wrote back, whatever I wrote back shall remain nameless also. My ending thing was, use your eyes again and look around. And so this person did. Next picture I got, a couple hours later, 2 pans of cupcakes with those little sprinkles that you baked right into the cupcake, and white icing with sprinkles on it, and they were gorgeous. And the person wrote just a little thing, much better, thanks. And I thought, now that is how you look at life in a fresh way. My life stinks. I know it stinks. I got to do something. Don't know what to do. Going to ask for help. Get some help. Figure out what to do to make my life better. Make cupcakes with sprinkles. Take them to work. You see how you break it down into manageable bites? Yeah. And that's just what Jesus is talking about doing with your life and with the gospel and your faith. Keeping it manageable. And the other piece that Smith talks about, which is also true, survival takes practice. Faith takes practice. It really does. I know a lot of people in our culture today, you know as well as I do, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. Well, when I hear that, I want to throw up. Because the obvious ramification of that is what? Everybody in the world stinks. Nobody's got any brains. Nobody can help me. I'm going to stay in my own head and I'm going to work it out for myself. I won't accept any advice. I won't accept any help. I won't offer any help. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. Which is to say, I choose not to belong to the community of human beings. which I consider the height of arrogance and wrong-headedness in every fundamental fashion. The 21st century way of saying it's all about me. And yeah, faith does take practice, and that's part of the problem. Because it does take time, and it takes you to places that you don't necessarily want to go. Because Jesus called into question for his disciples just in the reading today. How are you going to read the life around you? Now what they're looking for is a cheap, easy answer. And you know the complexities of life, there are no cheap, easy answers a lot of times. How do you reconcile with somebody that you've had a broken relationship with for so long? How do you come to terms with the death of a loved one that may take 2 or 3 years because you're so stunned by it? It is tough. It is not easy. But that is precisely why we practice in the church. We practice not only survival skills, but life-building skills. And that is who we are and what we carry with us. Our calling is to live the faith of Jesus and in Jesus. And to live that faith, very simply, is to live a faith in which we have confidence that he is busy in the world, actively working in it, and that we have calls from outside of ourselves to address the chaos and craziness of life wherever we're able to. Also to bring peace and reconciliation, and at least use that kind of language. The prophets, and we all have a prophetic function that way, always spoke with clarity about circumstances as they actually are in the world of their time, as we speak with clarity and truthfully about the world in ours. And also, they offered the hope of an alternative future. And that's what's so tough with our faith. Because in order to picture an alternative future different than the one that's present now, you got to put your thinking head on. You can't do it with fear or anxiety. You can't think. Your brain is cut in 90%. You only got 10% of your alligator brain working when you're in fear and anxiety. And that's your call, to use your whole brain to vision an alternative future and move that way. That's what prophets do. They picture the alternative future. What disciples do, which is what Diane and the other stewardship team members have done in the last month, is to talk about discipleship. What disciples do, you and I, we carry through what the prophets envision. So if you want to see a world at peace, a world of hope, a world in which everyone has plenty of food to eat and water to drink, that we have the picture painted. We have the alternative future laid out for us by Jesus, the living bread and living water, and we move toward that future, the kingdom of God, in our location here in the Poconos. And where we can, we extend our reach further. That's the gift we carry, the gift we've been given, the gift of hope, the gift of clarity of vision, the gift of fortitude and courage to speak truth as it needs to be spoken. And finally, the caritas, the love of God, to bring healing to a broken world.